Have you ever had a ghost from your past walk right into your present? I'm not talking about the friendly, nostalgic kind that makes you smile at old memories. I'm talking about the kind that makes your stomach clench and the air feel thin, the kind that yanks you back to a time and place you've spent a decade trying to outrun. For me, that ghost had a name: Trent Mochovic. And he didn't just walk into my present, he sent me his resume. Hello, my name is Peggy, and this is the story of how the boy who made my high school years a living nightmare ended up asking me for a job. It's a story about power, memory, and the cold, hard reality that sometimes karma doesn't just happen. Sometimes you have to schedule it for a 9 a.m. start on a Monday. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me, and let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. Now back to that resume. It landed in my inbox on a rainy Tuesday in Portland. I run a boutique digital marketing agency, Vanguard Creative, a company I built from the ground up with sweat, sleepless nights, and an obsessive attention to detail that my high school guidance counselor once called concerning. That same attention to detail meant I reviewed every single application for senior-level positions myself. I clicked open the PDF for a senior project manager role, and there it was. Trent Mochovic. The name hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, I wasn't a 28-year-old CEO in a corner office overlooking the Willamette River. I was 16 again, skinny and awkward, trying to make myself invisible in the crowded, merciless hallways of Northgate High. A wave of memories washed over me. The sneering laughter, the clever nicknames, the constant low-grade humiliation that he specialized in. My hand was actually trembling. My first instinct was to drag the file to the trash, to delete him from my life for a second time. But then a different thought, cold and sharp, cut through the noise. What if I didn't? What if I brought him in for an interview? The idea was terrifying, but it was also electrifying. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the mouse. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about consequences. The memories of Northgate High weren't vague or fuzzy. They were sharp, cinematic vignettes I could play back with perfect clarity. Trent wasn't just a generic bully. He was an artist of psychological torment. He never laid a hand on me, which was part of his genius. His cruelty was verbal, social, and relentlessly public. He nicknamed me Peg Leg Peggy after I tripped over a backpack in the cafeteria once, a name that stuck for 2 miserable years. He'd accidentally spill his soda near my art projects, then perform a dramatic, mocking apology that drew everyone's attention. His masterpiece, though, was during our junior year. He and his cronies managed to get a hold of a deeply personal poem I'd written for an English assignment. He read it aloud at a pep rally, his voice dripping with false sincerity, pausing for his friends to erupt in laughter at every heartfelt line. I can still feel the heat of 1,000 eyes on me, the sensation of my world shrinking down to a single, searing point of shame. So when Trent Mochovic walked into my office for his interview a week later, I had to physically anchor myself to my chair. He looked different, yet achingly the same. The cocky, athletic swagger was gone, replaced by the slightly hunched posture of a man who's been humbled by life. His expensive-looking suit didn't quite fit his frame, and the smile he flashed me was more anxious than confident. The biggest change was that he had no idea who I was. Peggy Callahan, the girl he'd tormented, had been swallowed up by Ms. Callahan, the founder of Vanguard Creative. My appearance had changed, of course. I'd grown into my features, traded my thick glasses for contacts, and learned to dress with a confidence I never possessed back then. To him, I was just another potential boss. "Ms. Callahan, thanks so much for seeing me," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm but sweaty. "Mr. Mochovic," I replied, my voice perfectly even. "Please, have a seat." The interview was a masterclass in professional detachment on my part. I asked him standard questions about his experience, his management style, his portfolio. His resume, on paper, was decent. He'd bounced around a few mid-level marketing jobs since college, never staying anywhere longer than 2 years. He spun it as a search for the right fit, but I could read between the lines. He lacked follow-through. He spoke with a practiced corporate jargon, using words like synergy and optimization. But when I pushed for specific examples of his accomplishments, his answers became vague. He was good at taking credit for team efforts, a skill he'd likely honed since high school. He was all surface, no substance. He was exactly the person I remembered, just wrapped in a slightly more desperate package. "Why Vanguard Creative?" I asked, leaning forward. "What about our company attracts you specifically?" He launched into a canned response about our dynamic brand presence and innovative campaigns, clearly quoting a line from our website's About Us page. He hadn't done any real research. "And what do you believe you can bring to the team that we're currently lacking?" I pressed. He faltered for a second. "A fresh perspective," he finally landed on. "Someone to really drive results." The entire time, a single thought echoed in my mind. He has no idea. He was trying to impress the girl whose poem he'd read to the entire school. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My HR manager, Liam, who sat in on the interview, gave me a subtle, questioning look. He could tell Trent wasn't our usual caliber of candidate. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. As the interview concluded, I stood and shook his hand again. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Machevich." As he walked out, Liam turned to me. "Peggy, I'm not so sure. He seems a bit slick. Not a lot of depth there." "I know," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. It probably looked predatory. Offer him the job. Trent's first day was a Monday. The air in the office was buzzing with the usual start-of-the-week energy, the clatter of keyboards, the aroma of fresh coffee, the low hum of creative minds at work. I made a point of introducing him during our morning team huddle. "Everyone, I'd like you to welcome the newest member of the Vanguard team, Trent Machevich," I announced, my voice bright and professional. "Trent is joining us as a senior project manager and will be helping us streamline some of our internal processes. Please make him feel welcome." A chorus of polite hellos and "welcome aboard" echoed through our open plan office. Trent stood beside me, wearing that same ill-fitting suit, a broad, confident smile plastered on his face. It was the smile of a man who felt he'd finally made it. He looked me in the eye and gave a nod. "Thanks, Ms. Callahan. Really excited to be here. Ready to hit the ground running." Oh, he'd be running all right. I assigned him his first project personally. I walked him over to a corner of the office that housed our old physical archive, a collection of filing cabinets and dusty boxes we affectionately called the morgue. It contained files from our first 5 years in business before we went fully digital. It was a disorganized mess that we'd been meaning to tackle for ages. "Trent," I began, gesturing to the chaotic pile, "your first task is a critical one. We need a full inventory and digitization of our legacy client files. Every contract, every creative brief, every invoice from this room needs to be scanned, labeled, and uploaded to the cloud server following a very specific protocol." I handed him a 10-page document detailing the naming conventions and folder structures he was to use. It was deliberately convoluted and mind-numbingly tedious. His confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "The whole room?" "The whole room," I confirmed cheerfully. "Accuracy is paramount. This project is the foundation for a new data analysis initiative I'm launching. It's not glamorous, but it's absolutely essential. I'm entrusting it to you because I need someone with a senior-level attention to detail to make sure it's done right the first time." The subtle flattery worked. His ego puffed back up. "Of course, Ms. Callahan, you can count on me." For the next 2 weeks, that was his world. While the rest of the team collaborated on exciting new campaigns for clients in the tech and fashion industries, Trent was alone in the morgue, battling a faulty scanner and deciphering my decade-old handwriting. I'd walk by occasionally and see him in there, his suit jacket off, tie loosened, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. The king of Northgate High, covered in dust, alphabetizing invoices from a defunct coffee shop we worked with in 2014. It was a beautiful sight. He tried to maintain his bravado. In team meetings, he'd talk about his project in grandiose terms. Making great progress on the foundational data initiative, he'd report. The integrity of our historical analytics is my top priority. My other employees, who knew it was just busy work, would shoot knowing glances at each other. They just assumed he was a new guy paying his dues. They didn't know the history. Only I did. One afternoon, I brought him a coffee. "How's it going in here?" I asked, leaning against a filing cabinet. He sighed, wiping a dusty hand on his trousers. "It's a lot of paper, Ms. Callahan." "I know," I said sympathetically. "But remember the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." I paused, letting the silence hang. My dad used to tell me that. He also told me that what goes around comes around. Funny how those old phrases stick with you, isn't it? I watched his face closely. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. A faint, distant recognition. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He just nodded dumbly. "Yeah, funny." He still hadn't made the connection. He was close, but not there yet. The foundation was laid. Now, it was time to build. After 3 weeks of solitary confinement in the morgue, Trent finally finished his foundational data initiative. He announced it with a flourish in our weekly status meeting, expecting a round of applause. He got polite nods. I thanked him for his diligent work and told him I had his next major project ready. He looked relieved, clearly expecting to be put on a high-profile client account. "Trent, I'd like you to conduct a comprehensive post-mortem brand audit on the Aura Beverage Company campaign," I said, sliding a thick binder across the conference table. A few of the senior designers exchanged confused looks. Liam, my ever-observant HR manager, raised an eyebrow. "Aura Beverage?" Trent asked, flipping through the binder. "I don't think I've seen them on our current client list." "That's because they're not," I said smoothly. "Aura was a client of ours about 6 years ago. They went out of business. The campaign was, to put it mildly, a complete disaster. It was one of our firm's biggest failures. I want you to go through every piece of data, the market research, the focus group notes, the creative assets, the disastrous sales figures, and compile a detailed report on what went wrong. I want a 50-slide presentation on the lessons we can learn." If the archive project was tedious, this was outright punishment. I was asking him to spend weeks wallowing in failure, dissecting a long-dead project that had no bearing on our current work. It was the corporate equivalent of writing, "I will not fail," 500 times on a chalkboard. "You want me to analyze a failed campaign for a company that doesn't exist anymore?" he asked, the disbelief clear in his voice. "Precisely," I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I believe we learn more from our failures than our successes. This is an important exercise in strategic analysis. I need to know you can identify key failure points. Consider it a test." He had no choice but to agree, though the chipper, can-do attitude was gone, replaced by a sullen compliance. For the next few weeks, Trent was a ghost haunting the conference room, surrounded by storyboards for a line of bizarrely flavored sparkling waters and spreadsheets showing a vertical drop in sales. This was when I started to subtly turn the screws. I'd stop by the conference room where he was working. "You know, it's funny," I mused one afternoon, looking at a print ad featuring a smiling model. The slogan for Aura was, "Find your true flavor." So optimistic. It's a shame when something with so much promise just fizzles out, don't you think? He just grunted in response. Another time, I scheduled a mandatory team-building lunch at a small, family-run Italian place downtown. It was the same restaurant where my parents had taken me for a cheer-up dinner the night after Trent had humiliated me at the pep rally. I watched him eat his pasta, completely oblivious to the significance of the venue. For me, every bite was a reclamation of a painful memory. The small pokes were beginning to have an effect. His confidence was eroding. He was becoming isolated from the rest of the team, who were busy on exciting, collaborative projects. They saw him as the guy stuck with the boss's weird pet projects. He started looking at me differently, with a confused, wary expression. The question was visibly forming in his mind, even if he couldn't articulate it. Why me? One Friday evening, I was working late when he came to my office door. "Ms. Callahan, do you have a minute?" "Of course, Trent. Come in." He stood awkwardly in front of my desk. "I've finished the preliminary analysis for the aura audit," he said, avoiding my eyes. "But I have to be honest, I'm struggling to see the strategic value here. I feel like my skills could be better utilized on an active account." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "Your skills are being utilized exactly where I need them, Trent," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I need to see that you can handle adversity, that you can find value even in a dead end. Not everyone has that kind of resilience. Some people just peak too early." I let that last phrase hang in the air. Peak too early. It was something people used to say about him, the star quarterback, the king of the school. I saw it land. The flicker of recognition in his eyes was stronger this time, mixed with a dawning horror. The gears were turning. He was finally starting to remember. The Aura Beverage Company audit broke something in Trent. He turned in the 50-slide presentation, and it was technically proficient, but it was the work of a man on autopilot. The arrogance he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by a quiet, anxious energy. He was now constantly watching me, trying to decipher my motives. The power dynamic had been established. He knew something was wrong, but he still hadn't put all the pieces together. It was time for the main event. I called him into my office on a Monday morning. "Trent, you've done a great job with the internal projects," I lied smoothly. "I think you're ready for a real challenge. I'm putting you in charge of the pitch for the new Luminous Tech account." His eyes widened. Luminous Tech was a huge potential client, a fast-growing software company looking for a complete brand overhaul. Landing them would be a massive win for the agency, worth millions. This wasn't a punishment. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was his chance to prove himself. "Really?" he stammered. "Miss Callahan, that's—" "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," I said with a reassuring smile. "You'll be the lead project manager. You'll coordinate with the creative team, develop the strategy, and you'll be the one to present the final pitch to the Luminous CEO, Mr. Sterling." What I didn't tell him was that I had already had several back-channel conversations with Mr. Sterling. I knew exactly what he was looking for, not just flashy creative, but meticulous, data-driven strategy. He was a numbers guy, obsessed with ROI and market analytics. I also knew that Trent's greatest weakness, the one that showed in his resume and in every task I'd given him, was his aversion to deep, detail-oriented work. He was a surface-level thinker, a schmoozer. I was handing him a gun, knowing he would eventually shoot himself in the foot with it. I gave him everything he needed to succeed: our best graphic designer, a brilliant copywriter, and our top market analyst. His job was simply to lead them, to synthesize their work into a cohesive, compelling pitch. The team was a well-oiled machine. All he had to do was not get in the way. For the first week, things seemed to be going well. The initial creative concepts were strong. But then, Trent's old habits started to surface. He'd dismiss the analysts' deep-dive data reports as getting lost in the weeds. He'd push the creative team toward flashy, generic ideas instead of the targeted, nuanced concepts they were developing. He was trying to create the kind of pitch that would have worked 10 years ago, all style and no substance. He was playing the part of the big-shot manager, delegating all the hard work while focusing on what he thought was the big picture. My team members, loyal to me and the company's standards, started coming to me privately. "Peggy," said Alani, my head designer, "Trent isn't listening. He scrapped the data-backed user personas we developed and wants to go with a concept based on a gut feeling he has. He told me my copy was too wordy and replaced it with a bunch of empty corporate buzzwords, added Sam, the copywriter. Each time I'd listen patiently and say, for now, follow his lead, document everything, but trust me, I have it under control. I was giving him the rope. The Luminous Tech pitch was scheduled for the following Friday. On the Wednesday before, Trent requested a final review with me. He and the team assembled in the main conference room. He proudly walked me through his presentation. It was slick, it was visually appealing, and it was completely, utterly wrong for the client. It was a testament to his own ego, full of vague promises and flashy graphics, with almost no mention of the hard data Mr. Sterling craved. It was a high school project designed to impress the teacher with a colorful binder rather than solid content. When he finished, he looked at me, beaming, expecting praise. "It's very vibrant, Trent," I said carefully. The team looked at the floor, mortified. "So, we're good to go for Friday?" he asked, completely missing the tension in the room. I looked him dead in the eye. "Absolutely. This is your project. I trust you to present it with the passion it deserves." The day of the Luminous Tech pitch arrived with a cold, gray drizzle that perfectly matched the mood in our office, at least among those who knew what was about to happen. Trent strode in wearing his best suit, a bright blue tie his only concession to the creative industry. He was buzzing with a nervous energy that he clearly mistook for confidence. He carried a leather-bound folio containing the printouts of his presentation, swinging it like a briefcase full of secrets to success. "Big day, Ms. Callahan," he boomed as he passed my office. "Time to land the big fish." "All eyes are on you, Trent," I replied with a serene smile. "Break a leg." The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. in our largest conference room. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Luminous Tech, was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s with piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He arrived with 2 of his VPs, and they sat, arms crossed, with an air of "impress me." My team, Alani, Sam, and a few others involved in the preliminary work, filed in and took seats along the wall, ostensibly to support their project manager. In reality, they were there as witnesses. I sat at the head of the table next to Mr. Sterling. Trent started his presentation. To give him credit, he had a certain flair for public speaking. His voice was strong, his gestures were confident. He moved through the first few slides with practiced ease, talking about brand identity, emotional connection, and market disruption. It was all smoke and mirrors. Mr. Sterling listened patiently, his expression unreadable. About 10 minutes in, Sterling held up a hand. "Mr. Machevich, this is all very compelling," he said, his voice flat. "But can you show me the numbers? What's your projected customer acquisition cost based on this strategy? What's the data supporting this specific demographic target?" Trent froze. It was a deer-in-the-headlights moment. These were questions he was completely unprepared for. The answers were in the detailed reports his analyst had prepared, reports he had dismissed. "Well, Mr. Sterling," he stammered, fumbling with his notes, "we believe the emotional impact of the campaign will drive organic growth that transcends traditional metrics." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "So, you don't have the data?" It wasn't a question. Trent tried to recover, quickly clicking to a different slide showing a flashy new logo concept. "If we look at the design language here," Sterling cut him off again, "I'm less concerned with the language and more with the results. What A/B testing have you done on these concepts? What do the focus group analytics say about brand perception?" Trent was drowning. He had no answers. He looked desperately around the room, his eyes landing on Alani and Sam, but they just stared back at him, their expressions neutral. They had provided him with all of this information. He had ignored it. I remained silent, watching the train wreck unfold exactly as I had designed it. The rest of the presentation was a painful, drawn-out collapse. Sterling peppered him with specific, data-oriented questions that Trent simply couldn't answer. The confident presenter from 20 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a sweating, stammering man who was being exposed as a fraud in real time. Finally, Mr. Sterling closed his notebook with a quiet snap. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Machovich. Ms. Callahan." He stood up, and his VPs followed suit. He shook my hand. "Peggy, give me a call when you have a proposal that's built on strategy instead of sentiment." He gave Trent a final, dismissive glance and walked out of the room. The silence they left behind was deafening. The rest of my team quietly filed out, leaving just me and Trent in the cavernous room. He stood staring at the blank projector screen, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The confident facade had been stripped away, leaving only the raw, panicked insecurity I remembered from a boy who had to put others down to feel tall. He finally turned to face me, his face pale, his eyes wide with a horrifying, dawning realization. You set me up," he whispered. "You knew this would happen." I remained seated at the head of the table, calm and composed, as his accusation hung in the air. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. "I gave you our best people, Trent," I said, my voice level. "I gave you all the resources of this agency. The luminous account was yours to win or lose. You lost it." "No," he insisted, his voice rising with a desperate edge. "This was a test. That filing project, the Aura audit, all of it. This was some kind of game, wasn't it? Why? Why would you do this?" I finally stood up and walked over to the large window overlooking the city. The drizzle from the morning had turned into a steady rain. "Tell me, Trent," I said, my back still to him, "do you remember a girl named Peggy Callahan from Northgate High?" The silence stretched for a full 10 seconds. I could feel his mind racing, flipping through the Rolodex of faces he'd barely noticed, people who were merely background characters in the movie of his life. And then I heard a sharp intake of breath. "No," he breathed. "It can't be. Pegleg. Peggy?" The sound of that old, hated nickname, even whispered in shock, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I turned around slowly. "The one and only," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "The girl whose poem you read in front of the whole school. The girl you and your friends made a sport out of humiliating for 3 years." He stared at me, his mouth agape. The color drained from his face as the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The strange projects, the subtle remarks, the impossible task he'd just failed. It all made sense to him now. I don't remember it like that," he stammered, a pathetic attempt to rewrite history. "We were just kids. We were just joking around." "Joking around?" I repeated, taking a step toward him. My voice was dangerously quiet. "Do you have any idea what that joking felt like? Do you know how many days I went home and cried? How many times I pretended to be sick just to avoid the walk down the hallway? You weren't just a kid, Trent. You were cruel. And the worst part is, you did it for an audience. You did it to make yourself feel bigger by making me feel small. And you've forgotten all about it. For you, it was a Tuesday. For me, it was a defining part of my adolescence." He looked completely broken. I'm sorry," he mumbled, looking at the floor. "I was an idiot back then. I'm not that person anymore." "Aren't you?" I countered, gesturing back toward the presentation screen. "That person was arrogant. He cut corners. He valued style over substance, and ignored the smart people around him because he thought he knew better. He was so concerned with looking like a leader that he forgot to actually lead. That's the exact same person who just lost this company a multi-million-dollar account. You haven't changed, Trent. You've just gotten older. Your high school behavior just has a new name now: professional incompetence." I walked back to the table and picked up my tablet. "Liam from HR will be in touch with you this afternoon to discuss your exit package." His head snapped up. "You're firing me? You can't fire me over a high school grudge? I'm not, I said coldly. I'm firing you for gross negligence and a catastrophic failure to perform your duties as a senior project manager. The grudge is just the reason you got the opportunity to fail so spectacularly in the first place. You see, Trent, I didn't set you up to fail. I gave you a professional stage and a spotlight, and you showed everyone exactly who you are. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. I really do hope you learn from this. I hope you finally understand that actions have consequences, even the ones you don't bother to remember. I left him standing alone in the middle of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The rest of the day passed in a blur of controlled professional activity. Liam handled Trent's termination with his usual efficiency. There was no drama. Trent didn't make a scene. He just quietly packed his desk, a small box of belongings, his only evidence of a short and disastrous tenure at Vanguard Creative. He avoided eye contact with everyone as the security guard escorted him out. The office buzzed with gossip, of course, but the official story was the one I'd given. Trent had been let go due to a critical failure on the luminous pitch. Nobody, except for me, knew the full story. That evening, I stayed late. The office was quiet, the only sound the hum of the servers and the rain tapping against the glass. I stood in the conference room where it had all gone down, looking at the empty chairs. I had expected to feel a surge of triumphant victory, a cathartic release of a decade's worth of resentment. But I didn't. Instead, I felt quiet. There was a sense of satisfaction, yes, but it was a cold, clean feeling, not the fiery vindication I had imagined. My plan had worked perfectly. I had been clever, patient, and ruthless. I had engineered a scenario where Trent's own character flaws led to his professional demise. I hadn't broken any laws or even any real ethical boundaries. He was fired for cause, a cause he himself created. It was a perfect, bloodless revenge. So why did I feel a strange sense of emptiness? I think it's because, in the end, it wasn't really about Trent at all. For all those years, I had carried the memory of his bullying like a stone. I let it shape me, motivate me. The desire to prove him and everyone like him wrong was the fuel that had powered my ambition. I built this company, this life, on a foundation of, I'll show them. And I had. I had shown him. I had won, by every conceivable metric. But now that it was over, I realized that the fight had become a part of my identity. And with the fight won, a part of me felt adrift. The revenge I had so meticulously planned and executed hadn't magically healed the scars of that 16-year-old girl. It had just put a bandage on them. The real healing, I was beginning to understand, was a different kind of work. It was about letting go of the need for his validation, or his apology, or even his suffering. The real victory wasn't in watching him fail. The real victory was in the fact that I had built a world for myself, where I had the power to make him fail. The power itself was the point, not the exercise of it. I got a call a week later from Mr. Sterling at Luminous Tech. "Peggy," he said, his voice warm. "I was impressed with your team's preliminary research, despite your project manager's unfortunate presentation. I have a feeling he wasn't representing their actual work. I'd like you to come in next week and pitch me yourselves. The real pitch." A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time since the whole ordeal began. "We'd be delighted, Mr. Sterling," I said. My revenge hadn't been the cathartic explosion I'd craved, but something quieter and more profound was taking its place. It wasn't about destroying Trent's life. It was about reaffirming my own. He was a ghost from the past, and I had finally, decisively, shown him the door. Now, I could get back to the business of building my future, not as a reaction to my past, but for its own sake. The stone I had been carrying for so long was finally gone, and I hadn't realized just how heavy it was until I felt the lightness of its absence. So, did I get the perfect movie-ending revenge? Not exactly. There was no moment where Trent fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness, no dramatic confession of his past sins. Life, I've learned, is rarely that neat. What I got was something more real and ultimately more meaningful. I got to see the bully not as a monster, but as a man whose weaknesses had simply followed him into adulthood. And I got to prove to myself that the power he once held over me was an illusion. We did land the luminous tech account. The real pitch, led by Alani and the team, was brilliant, and it marked the beginning of a huge growth period for my company. In a way, Trent's failure was the catalyst for our biggest success. There's a certain poetic justice in that, I suppose. I never heard from him again. I sometimes wonder what happened to him, but the thought is fleeting. He no longer takes up any space in my head, and that's the most profound victory of all. This whole experience taught me that revenge is a complicated thing. The desire for it can be an incredible motivator, but the act itself can leave you feeling hollow if you're not careful. The real satisfaction wasn't in his downfall, but in my ascent. It was in building a life so successful and a character so strong that when my past came knocking, I could answer the door not as a victim, but as a gatekeeper. And for anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small, remember this: the best revenge isn't about stooping to their level. It's about rising so high that they become an insignificant speck below. Build your own empire. The view from the top is so much better. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've ever had a similar experience, or if this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating the messy, complicated, and sometimes satisfying journey of life.